So Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is coming out a little bit later this year, and they're billing it as a superhero horror movie, which I'm kind of doubting, but it actually got me curious to check out that genre. So that's what we're doing today. We're checking out 10 movies that involve superheroes, but actually feel way more like a horror movie than anything else. I've seen some of these lists before, and I didn't totally agree with all their picks, and I'm going with things that are not necessarily a little bit more of the mainstream varieties. Like we're skipping The Crow and we're skipping Hellboy, because I feel like those are maybe a little bit more superhero oriented than they are horror. But let's take a look to see how this all shakes out. Number 10. Well, let's get this out of the way right now, but when you say superhero horror, the first thing that most people are going to talk about is Brightburn. It came out in 2019, was directed by David Yarovsky, and produced by James Gunn, and written by Gunn's brother and cousin. The story, stop me if you've heard this one before, is about a couple who are having trouble conceiving a child, only to discover a ship in their backyard containing a small baby. As the kid grows up, he discovers that he has superpowers far greater than those of mortal man. He has an alliterative name in Brandon Breyer, and his parents keep his spaceship in a barn. So yeah, I mean, we're doing Superman as a horror film. Get it? He starts hearing voices, perving on girls, drawing weird symbols, breaking girls' hands, and eventually embracing the psycho within and donning a costume to go a-killing. There's a few solid gross-out gore moments, but not a whole lot to our characters, and sadly it doesn't really live up to the potential of its premise. Elizabeth Banks and David Denman are pretty solid as the concerned parents, and of course Gunn managed to sneak his girlfriend in there as the teacher, and yeah, sadly this is just a movie that I really want to like, but just can't. The premise is fantastic. The concept of making a film of how an alien would adjust to life on our planet, coming to terms with their given mission versus their adopted heritage, is a great movie. But it's not this one. Sadly, the most promising and entertaining part of this one occurs over the ending credits that sneaks in both Michael Rooker and the Crimson freaking Bolt. I will not stop until I get a Brightburn super crossover film. If Shyamalan can do it, then Gunn can do it too. Damn it! Please, don't bone it up like M. Night did, huh? Please. Number 9. In 2007, there was a little film called The Dead One, also called El Muerto, and it begins with an Aztec legend talking about their return, and this one was directed by Brian Cox.
I swear to God, I'll pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans.
Nope, not that one. And it was an adaptation of the indie comic called El Muerto, the Aztec Zombie by Javier Hernandez. It has a young man being led to an Aztec shrine to the god of death and making a sacrifice, and he's led there by an old Indian played by Billy Drago. Interestingly, Drago is actually half Native American, although the accent that they give him is a little iffy.
See, this is the way.
When little Diego grows up, he's now douche-era Fez, and it's near the Day of the Dead festival, and he's in love, but keeps having these odd visions. He gets in a wreck and oh hey, is this the Conjuring universe? Is Annabelle here, or does this guy just only play priests? The god of death restores Diego, but 1 year later, and the death god is demanding 3 sacrifices, and he has increased strength, can't feel pain, and his face is permanently skull designed, so that he has to wear makeup to cover it. When people start ending up murdered with their hearts removed, Michael Parks steps in to investigate, and it seems Diego is also able to heal people. And this movie apparently had a budget of $1 million, but I'm not entirely sure how they spent it. It definitely has some horror elements. The god of death makeup is pretty cool, hearts are removed, caps are decapped, and it moves towards a whole is he the villain or the hero thing, even though they could have played that up more than they actually do. It's kind of boring, to be honest, and it's clear that they're trying for a Crow-like vibe, but never really quite get there. But it has a few charms, like Billy Drago playing an old grandma character. It's just really cheap, and kind of showed why Wilmer Valderrama never really got more lead roles. Number 8. Here's a weird one. Let's talk about 1992's Shin the Kamen Rider. And if that name rings a bell, it's because you know about Kamen Rider, or Masked Rider. It was from the 70s and part of a massive, long-running series that had as many variations as the Power Rangers. The character resembles a grasshopper who rides a motorcycle because why not, and has a ton of variations, the better to sell more action figures. And the character's about to get a reboot from the guy who did Shin Godzilla, and coincidentally enough, it's also going to be called Shin Kamen Rider. You might be familiar with him from the 1995 American Masked Rider series that used Japanese footage mixed with new English footage a la the Power Rangers, but a few years before that, this version of Shin Kamen Rider became the most notorious bit of the character's history, as the show's creator wanted to make a darker film version to appeal to the adults who grew up on the character. Keep in mind, the original series was a kid-friendly action show, and this movie starts like this. So right off the bat, we see that we're in horror territory, and there's Shin here, who's a test subject for geneticists, but there's an evil doctor who's also doing tests on himself, transforming into a killer monster. Shin discovers his DNA has been fused with that of a grasshopper, and he does ride a motorcycle, and eventually he has a full-on body horror style transformation. Keep in mind, the original Kamen Rider was just a basic transformation, like he would just turn into the rider. But this guy turns into him like his name is David and he's in London or something. Instead of a guy in a suit, this one's a mutated monster fighting other creatures like he's the damn Guyver or something. And it was hoped to kickstart a new wave of adult-oriented adventures for the character, but would remain his only outing, although he would make appearances in the more mainstream Rider series, although obviously the horror elements would be toned down there. It's silly but pretty wild to watch what is mostly a kid's character in some violent action with some odd nudity with some nice transformation practical effects. Number 7. Next up, we're going to talk about My Marvelous Man-Thing. Oh, sorry, totally misread that part of the script. Next up, we're going to talk about Marvel's Man-Thing. So here's the thing, I used to have a giant-sized Man-Thing when I was younger. Wait for it. Which was a comic book that Marvel put out in the 70s. The character had his own series for quite a while, but it was pretty bizarre and I really loved it. The character debuted around the same time as DC's Swamp Thing, who became his own couple of movies, which I've covered on this channel before, and there's a lot of information and things up in the air about which ripped off which, or if both were ripped off of a similar character called the Heap. Anyway, after his book was canceled, he bounced from guest spot to guest spot, always showing up in the Marvel Universe, but never quite headlining again. Then, as superheroes were booming, what with the X-Men movies riding high and Spider-Man breaking records, someone thought it was a good idea to make a movie about the character. So we got 2005's Man-Thing, directed by the Lawnmower Man's Brett Leonard. It takes a very different approach to the character as a new sheriff arrives in a swamp town and people there are being torn apart by something out there. And there's an oil plant and protesters clashing and something is killing people by bursting branches out of them and turning them into twisted sculptures. It plays up the horror element, which is nice and all, but this is a really perplexing movie. If you're a fan of Man-Thing, the character from the comic book, you're not going to be into this. Even though they name-drop Ted Sallis and the Nexus of Realities, the character and his abilities and demeanor are completely at odds with his print version. They have the look pretty down, and I love the design of him. This suit looks great, but what made that book great was its oddball quirkiness, none of which is present here. And what we have here is pretty boring for the most part. If you're expecting a typical sci-fi channel type movie, it's probably as good as any of those. But if you're expecting some sort of Marvel film, you're gonna be very disappointed. Interestingly enough, the modern Swamp Thing TV series seems to have taken quite a bit of inspiration from this movie, from the overall look of it, to the death by branch tentacles from within, to the environmental aspects, to the sluggish pacing. Number 6. We head now to 1996 and we're going to check out Vampirella from Jim Wynorski. And Wynorski's name attached usually means you're going to be watching some schlock, but it also means you're going to have some fun. Based on the long-running Vampirella character created by Forrest J. Ackerman and Trina Robbins, it's apparently the one film that Wynorski regrets making. He had studio problems, on-set accidents, hated the lead casting, but basically everything. That lead is Talisa Soto, most known for playing Katana or being a Dalton-era Bond girl. She's Vampirella, who lives on a planet called, no kidding, Draculon. We get some genre cred with the always amazing Angus Scrimm here as the High Elder, who commits the hell out of this role, and our villain, Roger Daltrey? He commits as well, but his commitment is to the top, and seeing how much over it that he can possibly get. He kills the tall man, and this one is a pretty fractured history, as it's supposed to be a bigger budgeted film in the 70s from Hammer, with Carolyn Monroe a possibility in the lead role, which, yeah, I would like to see. How was that not a thing? Peter Cushing, Orson Welles, and Donald Pleasance were all lined up as well, but we never got that film. Instead, we got this. Vladdy escapes to Earth, and there's this special UFO unit there, and Vampy shows up to get revenge, sporting an outfit that I guess sorta resembles her trademark look, but let's face it, the character's mainly known for two things, and Soto's not quite as curvy as the source material. Wynorski has stated that he envisioned Julie Strain in the role, but Roger Corman's team said no, as they felt Soto had more name value. Vlad is now in Vegas, running crime in these very subtle outfits. And hey, speaking of subtle outfits, he might slam Soto for not filling out the outfit, but I'm sorry, whoever designed this thing should be to blame. This doesn't look like it would be flattering on anyone. I understand that they had to amend the original outfit because, hey, that was just a skimpy swimsuit. But then they went with this? Oh yeah, Vlad is also a Vegas performer, and just so you understand how weird this world is, when Vampy was chasing Vlad, she crashed on Mars where she stayed for hundreds of years. Then, I guess here, in the 90s, we went to Mars with John Landis and the second Deathstalker in the shuttle, so I guess that Vampy's lucky that Landis didn't crash the shuttle into her and cut her in half. I wish I could say that this is as fun as it sounds, but it's kinda not. Check it out if you want to see Roger Daltrey really having fun, but for the most part, it's skippable. Number 5. In 2011, someone said, hey, Saw is popular. Superheroes are popular. How about we mix them? So they did, with All Superheroes Must Die. Written and directed by Jason Trost, who also gave us the FP movie, which there's now 3 of, so a timeline is apparently in order. This one introduces several heroes with odd injections on their wrists, and their powers are gone, and it seems as if their arch nemesis Dexter's dad would like to play a game. So he's set up innocent people all over town and will kill them unless they complete the tasks. One of the heroes is MacGyver, and one is Trost. And here's an interesting bit. In the FP, his character wears an eye patch, and here his mask is torn, exposing one eye, but covering the other. In fact, Trost is actually blind in his right eye and covers it out of necessity. The heroes split up, each having to face villains in order to save people, including Sean Whalen, who was in Waterworld, because Waterworld was a thing at one point. It's still a feature at Universal Studios in Hollywood, and I figure more people have actually seen the Waterworld show there than have ever seen the movie. The games are rigged up against them, and the challenges get more and more personal as they go on, but it really suffers from the production value. It had a budget of $20,000, and they shot it in 15 days, often losing locations and having to throw out a bunch of script pages, but what's left is some thin characterizations with fairly unlikable characters. It really does feel like a Saw movie in which a couple of the characters are in tights. The superhero element loses its meaning once you have people with no powers doing unheroic things. This one actually had a sequel 3 years later with All Superheroes Must Die 2, The Last Superhero, with Trost returning as Charge, and they've dropped the whole Saw thing, and instead it's presented in documentary form, investigating the murder of a young woman. When they get a chance to interview him, it's revealed that he's the last superhero. It's in the title. And get their backstories, and it's a slight step up from the last one. It's still a bit tedious and not as interesting as I would hope, and it loses most of its horror aspects, but the whole thing is free to watch on YouTube, and it's worth checking out if you like this kind of format. Number 4. You want a solid mixture of horror and superhero? Well, check out 2014's Wolf Cop by Lowell Dean. And you've got this small town cop named Lou Garou, which, if you're not sure, is a play on the Loup Garou, another name for werewolf. There's an election going on, and out on a call, Lou ends up in the middle of a ritual and wakes up the next morning with a pentagram in his belly and one of the candidates dead. As the night comes around, he starts to transform, beginning with his, penis. Rick Baker had to make a hand stretch out. These guys had to make hairy balls hairier. He transforms and kills some gang members, and his changes are pretty gnarly as he bursts out of his own skin each time with pretty fun practical effects, and loves his beer and donuts, and goes out to fight crime in the Wolfmobile, and what ensues is some pretty entertaining chaos. It's funny, creates a good atmosphere, and some actual characters, and I mean, dude gets his own wolf sex scene, so it has some odd twists and turns, and yeah, I mean, it's not high art, but it's a very enjoyable watch. I mean, come on, it's a movie about a werewolf who discovers the secret that makes him better than all previous werewolves is drinking alcohol. The ending promises a sequel, and sure enough, there was one, and they promised it for 2015, but it took until 2017 for another Wolf Cop to come out, and that's what it was called, Another Wolf Cop. He's back, of course, still on the patrol, and if you're an Astron 6 fan, you'll get a treat as the boys play a gang in the beginning, and it takes place around Christmas. And Kevin Smith is in this, and has anyone ever commented on his hands? He uses his hands a lot, and I don't know why, but it's unsettling. Is it that he holds his fingers in weird positions? I don't know. There's something strange about it that I can't peg down. Somehow, Willie is back in this one after being killed in the last one, and he has a creature in his belly, and there's a robot guy now. And like the title says, there's another wolf, and they're still fighting the shapeshifters, and it's still pretty fun. But it's missing something. I didn't have as much of a wild time as the first one, but there's worse ways to spend 90 minutes, and I've already covered some of those worse ways earlier in this list. Number 3. Dancing on the edge of horror and sci-fi and action is 1986's The Wraith, directed by Mike Marvin, fresh off of doing Hamburger the Motion Picture. It's a movie that's ahead of its time and yet somehow could only have existed in the 1980s. There's this group of very randomly dressed guys, like some are punks, some of them are lettermen, and this guy is just like a frat broski. He's one badass dude though. He's like the baddest. Like this guy would never ever watch a movie like The Notebook or anything. Like this guy races cool cars, so he'd want nothing to do with Cameron Diaz's My Sister's Keeper. The ice cream man is on hand, as is Topper Harley, just driving around in a jean jacket with no shirt, pretty much like you would expect Charlie Sheen to do. And check out baby Audrey Horne. And Jake is new in town and befriends Billy here, whose brother died a while back under mysterious circumstances. Billy's brother was dating Carrie, and her current boyfriend is Packard, who's insanely jealous and is the one who killed Billy's brother. And seriously, Clint Howard has this whole Eraserhead thing going on, and this new mysterious car shows up and challenges the gang to a race, but instead, Augie crashes into the car, dying while the turbo magically reforms. Randy Quaid appears, and oh my god, what the hell has happened to Randy Quaid? It's just just really depressing.
Hashtag PMC. Police Media Corruption. Ba-dum!
Instead of exploding, the victims turn into this husk thing, and then there's this spacesuited guy that shows up with a futuristic gun. And here's the deal. This is the Crow. It's a guy who's murdered by a gang of thugs and comes back from beyond the grave in order to get revenge on them. And one of them is even named Skank. And get this, the main villain in The Crow was T-Bird, a car. The main villain here is Packard, also a car. And you want to hear something really weird? Everyone knows about Brandon Lee dying on the set on The Crow, but this movie also had a filming death. One of the camera cars flipped unexpectedly and crashed into a camera operator, killing him. Both films are dedicated to those that died, so if you're wondering why I didn't include The Crow on this list, I kinda did. Just remove the black latex and barbed wire and replace it with a high-tech Borg suit. Take away the face makeup and replace it with a rad helmet. Get rid of the magical crow and swap in a magic car with a vibrating engine that can reform. So like Eric Draven meets Christine. Plus, with how much the Crow embodied the 90s with the music and style, this might be the most 80s movie of all. It's a good time, I enjoyed this one, but it might be nostalgia talking, so I guess your mileage may vary. Number 2. You know, with this whole Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness coming out and going with the whole Spider-Man using actors from the other film versions, I really think that movie should also have appearances by the old 1978 TV movie version of the character with Peter Hooton.
Hey bud, what happened to your clothes?
I got molested in the little boy's room.
Any excuse to use that clip. And I think they should also use Dr. Mordred. You see, this 1992 film, directed by both Albert and Charles Band, features Herbert West as Anton Mordred, who's a wizard under the service of the Ancient One. I mean, the Monitor. And the villainous Cabal is an evil wizard trying to open the gates of hell. The Doctor lives in an apartment building with some eccentric neighbors and lives in New York, just not on Bleecker Street. And the reason this movie is so damn similar to the Marvel Comics character is that the script was initially for a Doctor Strange movie. Band had an option on the character to make a feature adaptation, but didn't act fast enough, and the option expired before they could start filming. So, instead of simply scrapping all the work that they had done, they just adjusted the script to alter the details of the characters to make them new, and then added some extra elements like boobs that gave it an R rating, something that they were not allowed to do if it had remained the Marvel guy. It's kind of fun to see Combs play a wholesome good guy for once, but I'll admit that as a hero he comes across as a bit bland. And speaking of bland, the movie does drag quite a bit for the middle act, but it's no worse or no better than the other full moon films of the era. But the ending is all out, featuring a pretty fantastic stop motion battle between a T-Rex skeleton and a mammoth. Throw in some other cool stop motion creatures and Combs in this super dapper blue jumpsuit, and you've got a good time, even if the movie's not as strange as it could be. Number 1. Alright, for the ultimate in superhero horror hybrids, it can only be 2000's Faust by Brian Yuzna. And if you've never heard of the comic book version of Faust, oh boy! This series is wild, over the top, and intricately drawn, featuring extremely graphic sex and violence, and was a pretty surprising choice for an adaptation. The comic ran for 15 issues starting in 1987, but only came out approximately once a year, and missed a few years so that issue 13 didn't come out until 2005. Then it went away for 7 full years until they were able to wrap up the storyline with the final 2 issues, concluding the stories a full 25 years after the first issue. 25 years for a 15-issue comic book run. The movie came out around the same time as issue 10 or so and wasn't complete yet, so the finale of the book and film are drastically different. The film stars Jeffrey Combs again as a cop who arrests Wolverine. Or, sorry, John Jaspers, who is then attended to by psychiatrist Jade DeCamp. There's also big bad guy the Wishmaster and his right-hand woman Claire, and John's story is vaguely Crow-like as his girl is killed by a gang of thugs, but is instead recruited as an assassin by M. And yeah, this came out the same year as the original X-Men movie, and in that one Wolvie barely uses his claws, but here you get a guy using them to chop off heads, and it's glorious. John betrays M, so they bury him alive, but he breaks free and is reborn as Faust. And here's where things go off the rails. He shows up as this. And slaughters a gang, while M enhances Claire's body until she's just a big old blob. And yeah, John's not wearing a costume. He transforms into the Faust form, which is very different from the comic, in which he was just a guy in a costume. But I kind of love it. His appendages wiggle like the rubber that they are. And this one is wild. It has chest monsters and just gets weirder and weirder as it goes on. And it's so bad, but yet so compelling. It's such an odd mishmash and extreme condensing of the source material so that every 5 minutes it seems like a ton has happened. It's anything but boring, and certainly an acquired taste. But oh yeah, I've acquired it. I mean, there's a giant hell beast penis thing at the ending, and that's an endorsement. Is it? Yes, it is. So there you have it, 10 movies that involve superheroes in one way or another. Yeah, most of these, they're definitely superhero oriented, but some more so than others. If you know of some other ones, or if you liked any of these or love them, or if you hate any of these ones, let me know down below. I also want to hear about any superhero horror movies that you feel as if I forgot. Not the big ones. I mean, there's ones I obviously didn't include, like Hellboy and The Crow, like those things. I know about those. Clearly, let me know which other ones I missed down below. Maybe some of the more obscure ones that I'm not up on. Leave that in those comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you enjoyed the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you want to know when new videos are coming out from the channel, hit the bell. And also, please, if you get a chance, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines and help support the channel like these guys do. I certainly appreciate that. I appreciate you watching the videos, and I'll see you very, very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.